Okay, everyone. So this week we will be learning about ancient Greek art. And prior to the beginning of what we consider Greek civilization, there were three main groups of people that were living in the area where Greek originates. So I'm showing you a map of these three groups. The first were the Cyclad culture or the Cycladic people, and they live between circa 3000 BCE to 1600 BCE. And you can see from this color here, this kind of, maroon color, these islands, which are known as the Cycladic Islands, are where they were living. Then we have the Minoan culture, and they live circa 1900 BCE to 1375 BCE, and they're like this mustard yellow color down here on what is the island of Crete. And then the last group were the Mycenaean culture, and they live between circa 1600 BCE and 1100 BCE. And this green line represents the boundary of where their civilization was. So you can see that they were the largest of the three groups. So we're looking at the Bronze Age in the Aegean and the Cycladic Islands first. We don't have a lot of information about these people. They did not have a written language. And when I went to school a very long time ago, there was even less information about them. But in recent years, there have been some new discoveries of some buried architecture that was unearthed. And I have a video up that I would like you to watch that shows you about the frescoes in that architecture that was found. And a fresco is a kind of painting that's done on wet plaster. So what I'm showing you here is a figure of a woman from the Cyclades, and she dates to circa 2600 to 2400 BCE. And she's not so big, she's a little more than 2 feet tall, and this might hopefully remind you of another image that we've looked at already this semester. So think, what could this remind you of? Well, if you said the woman of Willendorf from Austria, you are correct. But note the date on this, circa 24,000 BCE, much earlier, because the woman from Willendorf is dating to what we call the Paleolithic time period, right, where people are hunters and gatherers. When we're looking at the Cyclades, they're settled, they're building architecture, so they're much later. And but we can still make a comparison to how the bodies are shown. Both of them don't really have facial features that are shown. This just has this really, protruding nose. The arms on both of them are very small. This one has very tiny breasts that are quite high up on the torso, and we have the hips and the pubic area, and the belly somewhat emphasized like in the woman of Willendorf. However, when we look at this in more detail, the Cycladic piece, we see that it's extremely symmetrical in the way that it is created, and we can actually put these circles over it and see that it's done in these three repeating circles. And then these eye-shaped kind of things that are painted or drawn on this here are indicating that, in fact, we believe that there was a face on this, and it was painted, but not as a representational face, where you put the eyes where eyes are and a mouth where a mouth is. It could have been covered all randomly with eyes and mouths and the entire body. And it's believed that people during this time period might have painted their own body in this kind of decorative way, where they have facial features or patterns or something that they're painting on their bodies. So that's it. We don't really have so much, but like I said, I have a video up that's going to walk you through some of the frescoes that have been found. Our next culture is the Minoan, and they live on the island, like I said, of Crete. So the Minoan Crete. They have this palace complex that we have found and we have discovered, although it is, of course, because of the time period, not in the pristine condition it's being shown here in this reconstruction. This is simply a drawing. So the site was occupied between 2000 and 1375 BCE, and there are a couple of things to point out here. It's quite complex in how this is made and quite beautifully done. We have this central courtyard here, and then we have a throne room. So there is a system of a king who is leading them, who is in charge of the people. We have various entrances to the, this is the east entrance, various entrances and a south porch and stuff. But it is, for the most part, we would consider a fortified walled city on top of a mountain. And in this area, we have lots of volcanoes, lots of activity here. So these islands are very steep hills. They were created by volcanoes. Really not good farmland. So we'll see as we go through these early civilizations and into the ancient Greeks that the people living in this area have always relied on the sea for food, for the vast amount of their food. So they're going to be eating fish and other things that they're catching in the ocean. Now, one of the most impressive pieces that we have from this palace is, or this whole structure, is the bull leaping, which is a wall painting, and it comes from the palace complex. This is late Minoan, and it dates to circa 1550 to 1450 BCE, and it's done in fresco. So a fresco, again, is a kind of painting that you do on wet plaster. As the plaster dries, it literally like sucks the pigment into the plaster, and so the pigment is actually embedded in the plaster. Because of this, it's very archival. It lasts for a really long time, as we can see in this painting. And if you've watched the video that I asked you to watch about the first group of people, you'll see also that they had fresco painting. So let's look at this together. I have a article up that I ask you to read about this, because there's some really interesting theories now about this particular painting. So we have this repeated kind of scallop shell or semicircular that goes around the border, which is really beautiful. I actually really love this painting. It's, repeating, overlapping with this patterning. So it's very aesthetically pleasing. The colors, I happen to love blue, so for me, it just looks really pretty and calm and soothing, this blue color. And then its complementary color to blue is orange. So we have these orangey browns that are playing off of the blue really beautifully. And a complementary color is a color that's opposite on the color wheel. So we have blue, orange, green, red, yellow, violet. These are opposites on the color wheel. Now, what's happening here? We have this bull that is beautifully painted and caught in this leap. This bull is leaping, and the bull mimics the curve of the patterning around the border. So we have this kind of curve here, a curve here, a curve of the tail, a curve up here, a curve of the stomach, curve here, and you'll keep seeing like these curves that are mimicking that other patterning. And this is one of the reasons why when we look at this, it's just really aesthetically pleasing. Now, over time, some of the fresco has worn away, but I mean, my gosh, it's a pretty old painting. Now, the interesting thing are these three figures. Okay, so when we look at these three figures, if we remember when we were looking at Egyptian art, the Egyptian and many early civilizations, like the Egyptians, would depict male and females of having different skin tones, because for the most part, the division of labor was the men would be out farming or fishing in this case, and the women are going to be more doing the domestic work within inside the houses. So they're not going to be as tan. So they have always been depicted with this lighter skin. So we can make the assumption that this is to depict a man, and these are supposed to be depicting women. There's been some recent scholarship that really analyzed this and said, well, yes, that might be that we have this division of male-female with the skin tone, but when we look at actually what they're all wearing exactly the same garments. And so there's been this theory that was put out that this is actually some kind of ritual that maybe young teenagers would be doing to enter into adulthood. And so what they would do is they would run to the bull and grab the bull by the horns, somersault over the bull, and dismount behind the bull. And so this is what is being shown to us. And, you know, this, if you were able to do this, would mean that you're now an adult. So I am glad that we don't have to do anything like this today. It seems like this would be really scary. You know, I'd rather just, as I did, go and get a driver's license, right? And that's my entry into adulthood or something like that. But what they are saying in this article I asked you to read is that maybe before you went through this ritual, there was really either non-gender specification, or the idea of gender was more fluid, that it was male-female, non-binary, until you really went through this ritual, and then you kind of were then assigned male-female. And it's an interesting theory, because you do need to ask, like, why are they wearing exactly the same thing? Why aren't the women covering their chests? Because in these early civilizations that we've looked at, we've always had this with the women pretty much fully dressed, completely covered, right? So please do read that article if you haven't gotten to it, and you have a quiz on it, so you have to read it. Okay, the other piece we have is the octopus flask, and this is from circa 1500 to 1450 BCE, and it's really beautifully done how the octopus has, you know, this, again, these kind of undulating curves within the tentacles, the repetition of the suckers, circles that are then repeated in the eye, the way the whole space is filled up, and then actually the whole flask is circular with the circular handles. And so they were very adept with not only creating ceramics, but these really beautiful artistic paintings. And this would be terracotta clay, and then they are putting a slip clay on it and having a chemical reaction take place while they're firing this object that creates the black of the octopus. And of course they're going to be eating octopus, because who doesn't love calamari, right, which is fried octopus. This is something that's very traditional in Italian cooking and Greek cooking. It's abundant in the seas around this area of the world. And I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to stop it here and pick it up in a minute.